Chapter 9. The air seems colder than normal in the area surrounding them as Jeremy and AJ make their way down Green Road toward the Cannon home, just a few blocks away from the school. From the distance at which they are now, they can see that all of the cars that had been seen out in front of the Cannon house not long before had all vanished. AJ is as excitable as usual, throwing numerous fingers into his palm, listing off reasons why the police may have been there that morning. Yeah, he says to himself out loud. Maybe their house was teepeed, he started. Man, we haven't done one of those in a while, have we, Jeremy? He states as he nudges Jeremy and smiles. Or maybe their house was tagged, he says, covering his mouth with one hand, mimicking the sound of an aerosol can while miming the use of a can to spray paint. He laughs it off and continues. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Cannon have been asking for it a lot lately, he says, nodding while pondering how crotchety the two older-than-average parents have been as of late. Jeremy had to agree with him a little, because he remembers Mr. Cannon's words at his father's wake. Who didn't see it coming? The old man whispered to his wife just outside the door Jeremy was about to walk through. I don't think I want the kids to spend too much time around this boy. He's probably just as crazy as that bastard was. Mr. Cannon had finished, never knowing that Jeremy was within earshot and had heard every word. Jeremy's fists tighten as he remembers the words ever so vividly. He looks up at AJ, who is still smiling, thinking up more and more reasons all those police may have become involved in their small suburban town. Jeremy just walks, eyes forward, trying to imagine for himself what could have possibly transpired earlier that day. His mind, however, isn't flowing with thoughts as innocent as those flowing from AJ's mouth. He doesn't know what took place in that house, but he knows it was far worse than anything that can be done with a few rolls of toilet paper or a can of spray paint. Jimmy also can't help but hope that the something that happened only to Mr. Cannon. A terrible thought that he wished he could shake, but he cannot help the hatred he feels for the man. So, AJ tries to get Jeremy's attention. Do you think we will get out of trouble if we tell them we skipped to come support our friends or something like that? He asks. Jeremy shakes his head, but he honestly doesn't know. Is that all you're really worried about? Jeremy snaps back at him. Did you not realize Mr. Sampson's actions back there? He asked, pointing back toward the school. He was holding back tears. His voice grows louder as he stops walking and firmly stares down his friend. I just... AJ tries to spit out something, but is interrupted by Jeremy, who has changed direction of his attention and points his finger forward down the street toward the Cannon's house. Or the fact that there were so many cops there? Jeremy's voice grows even louder. Do you really think they need that many cops for some spray paint? He finds himself shouting now. What the hell is wrong with you? Both boys stand silently, with both of their eyes glued to their own feet. Jeremy then shifts his body, and he and AJ walk on for a couple of houses in silence. As they walk on, both of them keep their heads down, and their hands pushed as far down their pockets of their sweatshirts as they can get them. Jeremy sighs in aggravation before turning his head to his friend. I'm sorry, he apologizes. Me too, replies AJ. I'm an idiot. True, Jeremy answers back. That you are. They both look at each other and let out a nervous little laugh. They have finally come to the realization that something terrible has probably happened at that house. As they find themselves reluctant to move forward, it is a surprise to both that neither break stride. As they approach the house, they see their friend Tyler sitting, head sunken into his hands. They notice Tyler by the glasses sitting on the step next to him. He's the only one of the twins who has to wear prescription lenses because of an accident in elementary school. The closer they get to the concrete steps leading up to the Cannon's front porch, the louder the sobbing they hear coming from behind the hands covering Tyler's face. The tears seep through the cracks between his fingers, glide down the back of his hands, following the veins protruding through his skin. After reaching his wrists, they then drop to the ground below, forming a pool of sorrow around his feet. He has cried so much that the salty lake on the step below him has grown to reach the edge of the step, so much so that it has begun to dribble down to the step below his feet, beginning a new puddle. Once he notices the tears, Jeremy runs up to him quickly and places his hand softly upon his friend's shoulder to simultaneously try to support him and gain his attention. Tyler lifts his head and his tearful, glossy eyes open slowly to see his friends that now gather around him. He shakes his head, scrunches his face, and places it once again within the safety of his palms. "Oh shit," AJ says quietly to himself. "I think you were right. It doesn't really look like it was just a simple tagging incident," he says under his breath. It wasn't quite low enough as Jeremy looks up at him with a condemning expression, letting AJ know how stupid he is, and silently telling him to keep his unkempt mouth shut. "What happened?" Jeremy asks, sitting down next to his weeping friend. Tyler doesn't answer. He just shakes his head, keeping his hands clasped tightly to his face. AJ walks over and rubs Tyler on the opposite shoulder. "Come on, man. What's going on?" AJ asks. "What happened here?" he continues. Tyler shakes his head again, saying nothing for a few minutes. They all sit there in silence until finally, Tyler speaks. At first he speaks into his hands, the words gurgled and the tears sitting in his palms. The sounds are muffled and the other two cannot understand anything being said to them. After trying to repeat himself a couple more times to no avail, he finally lifts his head and repeats himself. This time, unfortunately, Jeremy and AJ could hear him so much more clearly than they would have liked. "He's dead," he says quietly, looking AJ in the eyes. AJ takes a quick step back in shock as Jeremy begins to regret the awful feelings on the prospect of Mr. Cannon's demise. Tyler then turns to Jeremy, who jolts to his feet upon hearing what he says next. "Wilt's dead." The words leave his mouth, barely heard over the sobs. Jeremy begins to pace the front lawn, his body filled with anger and sadness as he searches his head for something, anything at all to say to try to bring comfort to his friend. How could he be so wrong? That it was not his friend's dad, but his friend's brother that had perished. He finds no words. He just looks up into the sky with hate and clenches his fists sharply at his sides. AJ looks down for a moment, but finally musters up the power to ask what happened. "I don't know," Tyler answers, raising his head from his hands. "There's so much blood," he says, staring at his hands, a great distance away from his face now. He searches them as if they hold the picture of the body of his brother painted in dark crimson. "There's just so much blood." Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the story and how it's going, please subscribe so you can get every chapter as it comes through. Discuss in the comments, plot threads, and where you think the story's going. Share with anybody you think might find it interesting. Until then, I'll see you next video.